5:06, calling to order the April 3rd, 2023 meeting of the Manchester Essex Regional School District School Committee. We will begin with public comment. Is there anyone in the room that would like to make public comment today?
We have one, but I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. We're starting within the room first, so if you please do, I will go to online after, but thank you. Okay, I recognize Nina.
Later, it was either 6% or 12% that you tracked as to how kids that come in might be special ed in comparison to the regular enrollment. I can't remember it. And I guess knowing that we have so many factors we're looking at, the siblings, it's great. And that's the start of what we're looking at, or we're kicking the can down because next year we might have 5 or 6 more kids looking at siblings. Or I just think it's important for us to have a fresh start. And I guess does the school committee feel really confident that they can speak to the people in Essex and Manchester and say like their kids might not be missing out on being in the Earl program? Because I've had 2 people in Essex say to me, they don't approve, but they question whether or not their child would get into the Earl program if there was a space. And I know that class would have space constraints. Again, I don't know how to research everything, but I'm just saying the object. Again, it's, you know, not trying to, it's just the way I think everyone's so conscientious of what we offer. And I think both communities want to feel like the residents get what is offered. And as soon as a student from another district gets there, they are seen as an equal student, which they should be, but we don't.
I know you know how this works. Anyone else here for public comment in the room? If anyone online would like to make a public comment, please, do we have people in the chat, Maria?
We need them to put their names in the chat.
We need you to put your name in the chat and your town, and then Maria will let us know who's up first.
Christine Delicio, Manchester.
Yep, Christina Delicio, would you unmute and offer your public comment? Just so you know, as a reminder to all, I forgot to say, public comment guidelines are found in section BEDH and BEDHE, and we keep it to 3 minutes, please. Go ahead, Christine.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I guess I became aware of the movie policy a few weeks ago when a petition was being circulated. I was unable to attend the meeting last week or 2 weeks ago when it was, but I did go back and listen to it. I guess so. To me right now, there's been 2 inconsistencies. The first person that spoke at the public comment, you asked for a name and town. You haven't done that again tonight. So I just feel like maybe there's a general inconsistency of policies that need to be tightened up a little bit. But as I said it in the chat, but that was not followed on after the first person in the last meeting. My concern is that there is no movie policy. As a previous educator and an attorney, this is known, it's been known, parents have expressed concern. I feel, you know, based on listening to the last meeting, it's being dismissive a bit. I guess why not just copy and paste a movie and follow through with this and make sure that educators within the building have clear guidelines that they are accountable to. So if there's no policy, teachers are not accountable and parents are not aware. So this should be a joint process for parents and teachers to work together. And without this policy, I feel like that is lacking. One of my favorite TV shows, Seinfeld, Kramer says, without rules, there's chaos. So why not just end what's going on, which it's not chaos, but just get a policy in place and put this to bed and let everyone rely on a document. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chat? Maria, who do we have?
Bonnie Rising, Manchester.
Okay, Bonnie, would you unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can,
Mhm.
thank you.
Good evening, school committee members and guests. Thank you for taking the time to hear the concerns of all parents regarding a movie policy at MERSD. As a teacher myself, I know how important it is to have policies in place so that we can make decisions that are consistent and in the best interest of our students and colleagues. It is critical that a movie policy be put in place that is clear and concise, both for substitute teachers and veteran teachers. There are too many mistakes being made with movies shown to students under age 18 at MERSD. We as parents should not be told at the end of a school day that a teacher showed a movie that was rated R or PG-13 to our middle school or high school students without telling us or getting our permission. As teachers and professionals, we do our best, but there are situations, including at MERSD, where teachers have been put on leave due to inappropriate behavior with students. Judgment has been questionable at times. Let's work together to make sure that parental permission is granted to all students under the age of 18. Thank you for respecting and listening to everyone regarding the lack of a movie policy at MERSD. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Bonnie. Anyone else in the chat, Maria?
Karen Bennett, I need a town.
Karen, could you please put
Karen
your
Bennett.
town in the chat?
Sorry, it's
Just for the
Manchester.
record. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Should be addresses.
I'm also somebody that is very supportive of a movie policy. When I heard a bit about what was happening with the various different movies that have been shown to some of the children, I don't have a child in the school system today, and I'm happy that I don't. Because I was appalled by what was shown to some of these children. So I've heard a lot of rumblings from a lot of folks throughout town, and I'm very supportive of a movie policy and support the parents on making sure that this happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chat currently? Okay. Okay, we will close public comment at this time. As you all know, if
Hello?
you've been here.
Oh, sorry,
Hello?
Pierce.
Hi,
is there-
sorry. I'm in the public chat.
Did you? We don't have, all right, could you just, we'll just take her name and,
Who is it?
yeah,
Susan?
this is Sarah Pierce. You're not appearing with your name and town in the chat, so that's why we didn't know to call on you.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's showing on the screen, so I apologize for that. I didn't realize that.
No big deal.
Okay. So Sarah
So,
Pierce, I live
Go
in
ahead.
Manchester.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you to the school committee members and Superintendent Bowden. I'm following up from the March 21st meeting regarding a formal movie policy for MERSD. I would like to clarify a few things pertaining to the movie policy proposed for the school. The intent of the proposal was to implement a policy that would create consistency in obtaining parental consent for movies watched in school. That movies shown are age appropriate and have educational value with parent consent. There was never any intent to change or take away current curriculum. In addition, no books were asked to be removed from shelves. The only time I've referenced curriculum was to point out that movies shown in school should be directly related to the curriculum. The 3 movies I have spoken of did not follow what guidelines there are in place to show a movie. Parents and teachers need to reference something when trying to make an informed decision to let their child watch a movie in school. Many districts have policies in place. This is not a new concept. Again, every family has different values and comfort levels when it comes to media. Each child can have a wide range of tolerance for material that is violent, graphic, or disturbing. I was hoping this process could be a progressive discussion that encompassed all views from teachers, parents, and the administrators in forming a policy that reflects equity for all involved. Parents are regularly referred to Common Sense Media for guidance on movie viewing. This is what their site suggests. Follow your school or district's policies. First and foremost, we can't say this enough. Check to see if your school or district has policies about streaming or showing movies and video content in classrooms. Every school and district is bound to have its own policies. I would like to say regarding the last meeting and public comments made, it was disheartening to hear a public comment made last week by an equity and diversity trainer asking the school committee not to waste their time on a large group of concerned parents that would not be honoring diversity and not be equitable. I again respectfully ask that the school committee implement a formal movie policy for MERSD. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
All right, in the meantime, has anyone else put their name in the chat? Okay,
Wait, Karen Bennett, Manchester.
Karen already made
Oh,
public
that was
comment.
it, then that's it.
Okay, okay. Anyone calling from the phone that can't put your name in the chat that would like to make a public comment, would you unmute yourself and do so? Okay, hearing none, we will close public comment at this time, and we thank you all. As has been the case before, many of these things will be addressed throughout the course of the meeting, even though this isn't a back and forth at this time, but I'm pretty sure we're going to address most of these things during the meeting, so thank you. Welcome, Erica. We have no student report tonight.
No.
So on to chairperson's report. I'm going to forego much of a report at this point because we are on a time crunch tonight and we have some important work to do. But I would like us to move forward reading our protocols for tonight. Who, with Kate, was it you last time? Yes, it was. Okay. Chris, would you be willing to read for tonight these two?
Sure. Recognize the importance of proactive communication and agree that there will be no surprises. If committee members have questions or concerns, they agree to contact the chair and superintendent well in advance of a meeting. Maintain the confidentiality of privileged information and abide by the open meeting law and all other statewide rules and regulations.
Thank you very much. That closes chairperson's report at this time. Consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda, which includes accepting the warrants for vouchers 1051 and 1052 and the minutes for our March 21st, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion?
Yes, I make that motion.
That's Chris Reed. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Erica. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. The motion passes. Thank you. Subcommittee reports. No facilities subcommittee report at this time. Finance subcommittee, we did have a collaboration group meeting, but I would really like us to have that conversation when the whole committee is here. So I would like to table it until the rest of the committee gets here.
Sure.
Okay, policy, I have no report here, and negotiations
We have not met.
they have not met because they have already met for many, many hours and done the wonderful work. On to superintendent's report.
Okay, I will start with two really big thank yous. One to Christy Umili, the science teacher at the middle high school, primarily a high school teacher, but she's a 612 curriculum coordinator, for coming up with the concept, working collaboratively with the middle and high school principal and the entire team to organize and pull off our first STEAM event. The showcase was extremely well attended, very fun last week. It was just a real smashing success, and I think it's going to be part of our annual activities plan coming up. So just many thanks to her for all of the hours that she put into developing the relationship with cell signaling and all of the other groups that she had in. And our kids were amazing. Their projects were just inspiring. So whether it's science, technology, engineering, and math, or traditional arts, the same night, we haven't had this much activity in that building in a long time. Many thanks go out to Tyler Garofalo, who is the teacher advisor to the 5th grade play. This was our first year of joining both 5th grades together in a production, and I think we need some thank you to the parents that kind of found their way through this process. It's never easy to be the first, and there was a lot of work that went into just understanding how the two groups operate and what the expectations are, and they really did a tremendous job pulling it all together. And opening night coincided with the STEAM showcase, so it was a real, we really punctuated the A in STEAM and had a full arts battery that evening, and the kids did a fantastic job and looked just thrilled to be on stage at the big middle high school. So I think two really successful events, very upbeat and positive events that kind of showcase not only academic, but also the arts. And we've been working really hard to make sure that those things are as prominent in our activities list as athletics. So many thanks to all who were involved with those projects. Also last week, it was a busy week, we had site visits for the high school principal search. Each day, one of the 3 finalists, as determined by the original search committee, came and spent about 7 hours on campus getting to know students, staff, and parents. This shout out to the students. They showed up big every day. I had planned the principal visit for students to coincide with the lunch block so they could grab their lunch and come up to the Learning Commons and just fire away questions. And they did a fabulous job. They, really watching the potential candidate, the potential next principals interact with the students gives us really good insight on what they might be like on a day-to-day basis. And it was really interesting to see that the questions, although people may have different points of view on them, there was a, kind of a pattern of questions that emerged throughout the day, regardless of which group was asking them. And it was around kind of tightening up some attendance issues or maintaining the attendance policies, senior privileges. Can we go out the back door? Can you stop them from going out the back door? So some nuts and bolts things of the day. But it was really curious to see that there is a lot of, there are common threads and themes about what we see in the schools, regardless of which group is asking those questions. So again, kids did a fantastic job, really kind of pushing them on their thinking and how they would act and interact with students on a daily basis. The teachers showed up in large groups after school. There's always some conflicts. And we had about, 6 to 10 parents, a core group that came each night to meet the candidates. At this point, I am just about wrapped up collecting the inputs from people, and we've been doing, using our networks to do some pretty extensive reference checking, both named references and unnamed references, just trying to get a sense of who these people are. And I'm getting ready to make a decision, and there should be an announcement out by the end of the week. So we're very excited, very excited about that.
Question.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. So for major hires like principals, usually the school committee gets involved or like be part of the interview process at some point in one way or the other. Is there going to be a process, the school committee, 1 or 2 members are going to be part of the interview process?
Well,
for those key hires?
I guess two comments on that. School committees don't do the hiring other than the superintendent and the business manager.
Of course.
So the opportunity for school committee members to be involved were in those community meetings. And we actually had 3 members at each of the meetings asking questions of the candidates.
Okay.
So I was able to debrief with them, get their feedback, know that there's an open channel to call if they wanted to give any independent review. So I feel confident that I have a sense of where the people who were able to come out and meet the candidates are in their position.
Okay.
It was the same process we did with the curriculum director as well.
Mhm.
that
Yeah, but
are-
principals
Any
are
of
usually
us,
higher positions. No?
nope, that's not our
No,
job.
actually, no.
Just superintendent and business
Yeah.
manager is our role. It's our hire for principals.
We have a fairly flat organizational structure, but technically the director of curriculum and instructional technology, the way we run it the way it's organized in this district is akin to an assistant superintendent. We don't use those titles here. So while the principal would have authority over climate, culture, and student management in the building, the director of curriculum and technology, like the director of special education, has kind of the authority over organizing curriculum K-12. So they work in tandem and they work collaboratively more than anything else. We haven't had to pull a hierarchy card yet, but that's how it maps out for us. And I think, I don't know if it's statute, regulation, but the school committee's charge is to conduct the search or have someone conduct the search for the superintendent. The superintendent conducts all other searches and makes all other appointments, except for the business manager, where the appointment recommendation comes to the school committee and then approved. And typically that's a position that interacts so much with this group that there is some involvement. So that's the way that's structured. At this point, I think it's fair to say Essex Elementary has not been forgotten. We've been having some ongoing conversation. And it's my intent at this point to try to continue with an interim for next year. We're going to continue that conversation and hopefully resolve that by April break so that we know where that stands and if we need to take a different course. But that's my intent at this time. The instructional materials challenge, movie policy. At this point, with respect to the comments that were made, the direction I'm going in internally at this point is to use our instructional materials challenge policy to take us through a peer review of the choices that were made by teachers. So I think what we know at this point in time is there are localized policies at each building, and this, let's be frank, it pertains most directly to the middle high school. But that each school does have a policy where if a teacher finds themselves in a position of deciding upon using a piece of instructional material that isn't at the age appropriate level of the students in front of them, they are to notify the principal, seek permission, then notify parents of their intent to do so. And that clearly didn't happen in at least one of these cases, less clear on the other two. That being said, I think we want to divide the issue into two. So in this case, principals are very clear that they do have expectations and local building level protocols for how to manage this. If a teacher doesn't follow a local or a building level protocol, it's incumbent upon the principal to deal with that in terms of a personnel issue. So that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is, I think, good questions have been brought up about the choice of these materials. So under the direction of the curriculum director, so Angela Bick, at this point, we are convening a group of teachers, English teachers, social studies teachers, school psychologists, the district-wide librarian, and a dean of students to sit and review the instructional plan from which the choice of these movies arose, review the films, and convene using a rubric to determine whether or not the rationale, lead in, and activity associated with use of those movies justifies the age level of the content. So they're going to make an academic decision as to whether or not these movies are appropriate instructional materials to be used with the lessons intended for, which is separate from whether or not the people followed the building level permissioning process to do that. So one would be a personnel issue that needs to be managed by the principal. Isn't for public consumption, whether or not somebody is reprimanded or not. Not that I'm saying that this rises to that level, but that would be the direction this would go. And on the other hand, we're going to go through and just evaluate peer to peer whether or not these things make sense.
Okay, so if I'm hearing this right, I just want to make clear for all of us and also anybody listening. You're saying that we don't, as we all know, we don't have a district-wide policy in place, but that building-wide, there are separate policies at each building, or we would call them protocols. There are protocols that the staff are expected to know. They have access to this. They know this, right? And so breaching the protocol, which has happened, that's a personnel issue that they have to deal with. But separately, you're looking to review the appropriateness based on the curriculum materials challenge protocol,
Curriculum
the policy
materials,
that we have.
the frameworks, the age level of the students.
Okay,
Yeah.
based on that, which is a policy that we do have.
Right, and I think that's where some of the confusion may be coming into play, and it's probably worth further discussion, which is we do have an instructional materials policy in play, which puts the responsibility into the hands of the professionals for making instructional materials choices. So if you think of the curriculum being the overarching framework of what we teach and the general pedagogy we use to teach it, then you can think of the syllabus or the day-to-day lesson planning, kind of at the teacher department or building level. And then within those units of study, each teacher will tend to make independent instructional choices. Do I use this primary source article? Do I use this film clip to demonstrate a particular point? Do I have the kids do a web research project versus a paper research project? There are day-to-day choices that teachers make of what materials to use, what pictures to use, what pieces of literature to use that are assistive to the overarching curriculum. And I would say that this falls within that they chose to use a film as an instructional tool to support the broader, I guess we'll assess whether it's supporting the broader curriculum goals.
Okay.
So are we
Which is
saying,
where I think sometimes, just to follow up, where it can start to feel confused with, well, if you start to talk about a movie, then do you talk about a book? So we're examining it on the professional's choice of instructional materials level at this point.
Okay, so that's what you guys are doing. So before us, we do need to agree that that's the right course, we need to talk to this, because we are still getting emails and
Yeah.
comments and things about this. So I'd like to take questions at this point. Eric, I see your hand up, and then Anna.
That's my question. Uh, in terms of the conversation, the ongoing conversation you're going to have about with the teachers talking to each other about whether something supports the overall curricular goals. I just was wondering how I know at least one of these instances that parents have complained about, the question was about a reward.
Mhm.
And is there a different matrix used when considering a reward? I mean, there's not a curriculum-based goal inherent in a reward, I'm guessing, and how,
I don't want to guess where the outcome is going to be, but if it's shown as a reward at a grade level in which that material isn't covered, I think we can make an educated guess as to where the outcome may land there.
I was curious if that led to.
And I think, this is the first time this has come up in years, in this shape. I think if we follow the process through and see where it leads us and see what the endpoints are, I think there's very good chance that we have reasonable and common sense resolution. And if we don't, and the committee wants to go further and look at a broader policy, I think you can do that. I think a movie policy, as I've seen, and it is done in other districts, that just says what can be shown at what levels. I don't think that safeguards us from what happened here. I think you can still end up with this situation by people being, in no malicious intent, making mistakes, being absent-minded, thinking they're doing the right thing, thinking they've covered the bases.
Anna?
So to add on to what you're saying.
Yeah.
But that's why we need a consent policy to cover not only the protocols with in the different buildings, but a policy overall, not only to protect the educators, to also to protect the district, also protect the students. And so it's all more transparent for everybody, especially the parents, what the process might be, regardless what the content is. I personally actually think, I agree the educator should and choose whatever content they want to provide. But it's the consent. I do actually feel strongly about that as a district, we should have a policy to protect the district. There is potential liability.
Thank you. So, did you have something you wanted to say, Kate?
Pam, you alluded to school level protocols. Are those things that are written down somewhere, and do parents have access?
I don't think
to
they're
those?
I don't think they're in the handbook, but that might be a reasonable next step.
If parents had questions about that, the building principal would be the first person that they could speak to about
Yeah,
that,
and
or
I
a
feel like,
teacher?
defense is not the right word. This does not happen, to my knowledge, it does not happen frequently that we are showing
Right.
movies which are rated higher level than the students that they're that make up the audience. We do have some large films that are used, Schindler's List, 12 Years a Slave, that are larger undertakings that are well known to people. But in terms of people making independent choices for forgetting to, not providing, not knowing to provide notice to principal and families, I don't believe this happens frequently. I think we do have a perfect storm of incidents occurring together, some of which, to my understanding, policies were followed, and it's more worth investigating whether or not the value of that choice is great enough to outweigh the rating of the film. And they've happened over 2 levels. And one of the movies, I believe, 2 of the movies have been used before. So I think we just need to go through our process and see what's uncovered, see what we don't know. Happy to, we'll share the outcomes of where we're going to go with this.
Right.
And then if we want to look at other options in the end, like ensuring that it's published in a handbook, we could certainly do that.
Do the existing protocols, to your knowledge, include parental notification?
Yes. Yep.
And I think that's an important for anybody.
Sorry if I left that part out.
No. I think that it's an important line drawn between notification and consent. I would just caution us to think carefully about who is excluded when we require active parent consent. just based on which parents are most likely to be responsive to school communications, versus parent notification that allows parents who want to be involved to opt out of those choices.
So at this point, I think, because I want us to take this seriously. I don't think anyone's going to rush this process. We are not in a position to do so, I don't think. And also mindful of our agenda and the time at this point. I guess I would like to propose, so we work by motion. It's nothing to be scared of. It's just a way of doing things. So I would propose that we do something a little bit formal and that I make a motion, that we make a motion and vote on it in order to make sure that everyone has an understanding of where we are and where we're going at this point. Sure. So, and again, when someone makes a motion and there's a second and then there's discussion and a vote, it can go any direction. So at this point, I will move that we, as a committee, choose to accept the process that is happening right now as has been outlined by Superintendent Bowden and expect a report back on that, at which point we have discussion and decision about our next steps as a committee, but that we actually wait for that process to happen so that we can have the understanding coming from the people who are most involved. That's a long motion.
It's a little wordy. but
That's all right. You got the
I will
point.
second. that.
Table until the.
Table until the outcome.
I actually didn't get the whole.
Can it
The
set-
point was wait, so that we know and that, so that people who are listening and really paying close attention, who care about this, know that we're not pushing it aside, but also we're not doing something right this minute. We're not necessarily saying, yes, we're gonna put a blanket policy in at the district level right now. I'm proposing a motion that we wait until the outcome of the internal process so that we can have all the information we need to make decisions to move forward.
Can we just to hold ourselves and that
We're in
process
discussion now.
accountable? Can we put a date on this? Can we set a time?
Knock that part out.
Yeah.
If all goes on the schedule that's been outlined, we should have some outcome by the first week of May.
Okay, and that meeting.
We need to provide some time for people to review and some time for people to collaborate and deliberate. And we haven't done this before. So right now we're looking at targeting a Wednesday before and a Wednesday after the break. I think the Wednesday after the break is going to be too close to our May 1st meeting.
Yeah.
So I would target the May 16th meeting for a report out.
Okay.
To summarize, you mentioned there are two processes. One is the content, one is the consent process. And you say the consent process is, which is formalized or re-emphasize again about the different protocols within each buildings. While the consent portion that you are visiting or talking to the principals, whatever it is. So then my question is, the protocols, like you said, is not in the handbook. They are not written out anywhere. Why don't we want to formalize the consent process at the district level policy to get it started and reviewed?
That's for this group to discuss.
And I guess what I'm suggesting in my motion is that I'm not saying that we aren't interested in doing that. What I'm saying is, in order for us to tackle something like this is a bigger deal than maybe we realize. And in order for us to do this, we need to have all the information at play. We also have elections coming up and our committee may have new members coming in. We have a lot here. And so the process of this, I mean, it would go to policy subcommittee to start anyway.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that my suggestion, again, it's all up for vote, is just that we wait until that initial report out and then decide our next step so that we actually see what is coming of all of the issues here.
So I
That's
think the
my-
answer to your question is that we are going to address it at the right time.
Any further discussion? Again, you can vote this up or vote this down. Any further discussion on the idea to table until the report out, which we will target May 16th? That's a much more succinct motion. Okay, all in favor? That's unanimous. Okay, so for those listening, those who care, we thank you for caring and for continuing to let us know how you feel about this. You can expect a report on May 16th, at which point we will discuss further steps.
And I'm chuckling because while I have people online, our policy manual is hosted by the Association of School Committees. and they got cyber attacked. So
Bad timing.
their master policies, to everyone who uses them as a carrier is now down. And I myself have gone to that document or to that manual 3 times this week for different things, and can't get to it. So patience, it's,
I have the complaints one printed out, but I don't have the actual instructional materials one printed out personally.
it's on hard copy on my desk, so.
Okay. Anything else for superintendent's report?
I did have one other thing, and it's kind of in line with tonight, the town meeting, passage of the budget, the report we're gonna circle back to, which is just on Friday. The crazy week ended with a legislator luncheon. We have a North Shore roundtable of superintendents, and we regularly meet, usually during budget season, to ask them for help with our budgets. The group is working very hard this year to try and get them to fully fund circuit breaker or increase the overall funding of circuit breaker to try to get more dollars in terms of revenue reimbursement back to the towns. So I don't know that the state budget isn't complete, and I'm not certain that we won't recognize more revenue before it's over, but we are doing our part. After our conversation on Friday morning, it felt good to be able to go out and do our part to try to bring more dollars into the towns to offset the cost to the taxpayers. So more to come on that. I think it was well received. We've asked for I'll share the document with you, all of you, but we've asked for a series of 4 different considerations in special ed funding, a general commission overview, similar to the Chapter 70 commission, where we go back and revisit Chapter 766 and what its intent is and what its funding mechanisms are, because it's antiquated at this point. Circuit breaker increased funding, and for those who still don't have that one down, not to go technical on it, but that's basically a level of reimbursement for out-of-district tuitions. So for every out-of-district tuition over a certain threshold, we get a percentage back. We're asking for the grand ask ultimately of 90% of everything over threshold. For districts of our size, it's about $400,000 to $500,000 potential give back. Whether that comes this year in a series of years, we're not certain. We've asked for, particularly for communities like ours that are almost solely dependent on residential tax bases, we've asked once again that Chapter 70 have another look. That it is the distribution of dollars, Chapter 70 dollars rightfully goes to the most needy districts, but it doesn't assist districts like ours, again, leaving the greater portion at home. So continued advocacy and lobbying, and hopeful that we may see some small portion of it this year and greater returns in the future.
That's great.
That is that.
I have a quick comment on that. I did hear a rumor that the governor attended the 50th
Yes,
flag, so
yep.
maybe that'll help.
Always curious as to whether or not you want to bother someone when they're here have their family time. But we all did take the opportunity to say hello and welcome her to our district. It was great to have her here.
Excellent.
And that is that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to continued business then, we have 2 items here. The first is the MSBA SOI for Essex Elementary School. Our vote tonight, so we're gonna let Pam explain, our vote is simply to approve allowing them to submit the SOI tonight. So what would you like to tell us about it?
So last meeting, we just did a straw poll to say, keep going, go full draft of the SOI. So we are, I would say 3/4 of the way through. I shared a link, which was intended to be just a view link because we have a lot of people in there moving things around. So I just wanted to keep it tight. When we're done, we will download that PDF and send it out as an attachment and post it for sure. But we're using the blueprint that we used for the Memorial School and obviously adapting it to what the actual needs are for Essex Elementary. So the vote you take tonight is the formal vote based off the straw poll last week that you do authorize the school district to draft and submit a statement of interest for the core program to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. So basically it's our pitch to go into the pipeline for studying the renovation and replacement of Essex Elementary School.
So again, no, we work by motion. I will move that, I'm gonna read this because we will have discussion, but what parts of this do you need me to read out? Yeah, tell me.
I think you could basically enter that into the record and have Maria type it into the minutes and say something like, in accordance with MSBA's formal vote language, unless you prefer it read in.
No, I think that that's what I was gonna say too. So.
Perfect. Okay, in that case, I move that we vote to authorize the superintendent of schools to submit the SOI for Essex Elementary School as outlined in the
Formal vote provided by MSBA.
formal vote provided by MSBA. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. I know we straw polled this last time.
So for the people that went through this, have any of you guys went through this during the memorial?
No.
Oh. So do you remember anything
not.
that raised last time around that we should pay attention to this time around?
Any what?
Any issues or concerns during this process?
No, because actually going back and looking at my notes and reading through, we were almost in exactly the same position. We were dealing with a potential override. We were preparing to put this in. We were uncertain as to how quickly it would go, but thought we needed to start the process. So I think the only caution is this last time we were able to, we had a crowding problem at Memorial School, which to my understanding kind of escalates the status of your submission. We don't have that going for us with Essex. The building's physically big enough. It's just outdated and it's going to be falling apart. It's going to be expensive to keep up over the next few years.
Yeah.
So I think we have a solid argument that it makes sense to put it in now. It's 10 years older than when we started. I can't think of any red
And
flags.
the program equity, I think, will be another key
Yeah.
component that we talk about. And there's always people who want to know about, merit of talking to MSBA versus not talking to MSBA. I think generally taxpayers prefer to find funding when you can make it available. I mean, for example, $12 million with this project is a substantial amount that I think from a financial standpoint, I don't think there's a lot of debate. MSBA comes with some guidelines on how things are done, and I would say it's the norm. But some people don't want to live necessarily by those guidelines. We're not required to do any of that to put a statement of interest in. At this point, we're just starting the process, and there would be many opportunities for us to learn about their procedures and for those that are new to it before any types of decisions would be made. And we'd certainly have to wait to hear from them because some communities put in statements of interest a couple times. That,
Eric, go first.
Were you done with your question on that though? Because you
I have
started,
a
so I'd like
separate
to finish
question,
yours.
if I can wait.
okay.
I have a separate
Oh,
one.
I was just finishing that, so go ahead. Yeah, if you're good with my.
Go ahead,
answer,
Erica.
Talking.
Mine is very general. I was just wondering, in addition to the fact that it doesn't bind us to MSBA, it also, as I understand it, doesn't bind us to anything, right? This is merely a statement.
You're reading my mind. Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to continue to discuss this and we're just starting the process to find more information.
I think the critical discussion point would come is if we did get picked up right away, right? And we get notice next November that they're ready for us to enter, getting ourselves organized to do that at that point in time. I would probably say, well, no, I think we were in the same place where we're saying, let's put it in and let's see what comes of it and let's see how the operational budget shakes out and then we'll make that decision down the line.
Yep.
It
Doesn't hurt.
just before, and to accentuate that point, if you do get lucky and they call you, the next step is they come typically to visit and see, you're still not obligated. Then they ask you for a whole series of reports to say, tell us more about your processes, how you do maintenance, no obligation. And then they figure out whether they want to invite you into the feasibility process. And then you have that. So there's really quite a few steps beforehand.
So this might be a little bit controversial, but not knowing what the process was with Memorial. So the question is, I think you mentioned about a few meetings back that if there's an emergency, Memorial could take on the Essex kids temporarily. So my question is, especially with Essex Town, that might want to look at the funding, and with the enrollment decreasing every year, is it possible to combine the elementary schools here and restructure the building? I know there's controversy, but
It is.
I'm just putting out there, restructure, rebuild, whatever might be on this land. Wouldn't that be cheaper than building a Essex elementary school? So Essex Town can afford.
You want to start that, Pam? Because I've got
Has that been
comments
done?
on that.
I have an honest answer.
It's good to
I like to
ask
answer
this and answer
questions. but that's not my question to answer.
Right, and I think it's really early to answer that question too, right? Or no?
What I can share is when we did go through the process for preparing for we're talking about it now as preparing for the memorial school, but what we were preparing for is submitting statement of interest on both buildings. Because at the time, we didn't have a sense necessarily of which one. We thought memorial needed to go first because of the Habib report and the analysis of what it would cost to try to keep it up.
The water coming out of the light fixtures, the holes above the doors. those
And the
things.
crowding, right? So
Yeah.
there were pieces that
Classrooms and
definitely
gym.
edged it ahead, but Essex was still an aged building and needed significant work then. So between the Habib report and our submission of both schools, remember, we submitted both for Essex and Memorial at the time. We had to designate a priority. Memorial was designated as the priority for the reasons just mentioned, and then that got swept in. Long way of saying, prior to submitting both of those SOIs, there was a committee that was put together to run focus groups, talk to community members. There's a large survey that went out investigating all the potential possibilities. One was a shared school. Mine was the dream, 2 schools, one K2, one 3-5. That didn't, neither of those got any traction. There was a really strong feeling at the time, heavy response that we wanted to each community wanted to maintain a school within its own district, within its own town, that they were kind of they were the schools that each town had, and then we came together at the middle high school. So we continued on the path that we were on at the time. I think we lost the opportunity for finding one unified site. We could certainly go back as part of feasibility or prior to and investigating on this question. But that's
So I
not
would like to
that's not a
speak to this.
one-person
Yeah.
question to answer.
I would like to respond a little bit to it because it's a right question to ask in public meeting right now because it's something that's come up. And by the way, I've had commentary brought to me a couple times now, and it's hard to bring up, and maybe you don't know the history, but it's especially hard to bring up if you're a Manchester resident because there was a commitment at the time.
Mhm.
that Memorial went first, and there was a commitment that Essex would get its school. And I will say that you're absolutely right. We are hearing and have been hearing and will continue to hear considerable concern on the part of Essex residents and leadership about the cost of our operating budget, right? But in the same breath, I will tell you the people who are most vocal about the operating budget are also equally vocal that Essex needs to get its school. I think timing is an issue. I think there is a discussion to be had for, okay, well, if we're gonna have a real hard time every year with the operating budget, why are we looking at taking on such a giant capital cost? That's all conversation to be had, but there is definitely considerable strong feeling about moving forward with Essex at this point. If it comes up in feasibility and we look at all those things, then that's a consideration for Essex to talk about then for sure. But the final thing I'll share is that after we had our meeting in November where Habib Associates reported out, I had an enormous amount of communication from people who were frustrated and even angry at even the possibility that repair or rebuild might be an option over replace. So there are very strong feelings about this. It's a right question to ask given what we're in, but we have plenty of time to get through it. Pam and then Erica.
And this is just from the bureaucratic side of the table over here. Repair and replace is MSBA
Exactly.
language that just signals no determination has been made. So the school district puts in a statement of interest for core program admission and review. We don't say, we want a new building.
Right.
That is a complete community process by which we go through several stages to arrive. That's the feasibility study
Yeah.
essentially. So it sounds very bureaucratic, is very bureaucratic, but for a reason that we're looking for the students to have a modern learning facility and to make you aware that continuing in this building means costs one way or the other. What the outcome is completely a community decision.
Kidding, very briefly. just
Go ahead.
Yeah, that to the earlier comment about people who sometimes will say, why are you bothering with MSBA and their rules and regulations? One thing that it does require is, this would only happen after feasibility before a vote, is that you have to present to them an analysis of a repair, analysis of a renovation, and an analysis of a new. They won't support anything until they see all of the options. So they require that. So it's another, what do you call that? Guiding
Exercise.
guideposts, something like that. I'm not coming up with the,
But to get the money,
yes.
we follow the guidelines.
You have to show that you're doing the homework and not prejudging.
Erica, then Kate?
I guess I'm just gonna echo a little bit of what Emma said insofar as, well, I will first say that I was here. I do remember the commitment. I feel strongly about it. I also feel strongly about the fact that it is really hard to understand the dichotomy between the challenge in funding the operating budget in Essex, which I really am trying to understand, and I can appreciate that different towns and different priorities and the need and the desire to take on such a huge expense. It seems like we're trying to do two opposing things at the same time. And so I'm just putting that out there and not saying that therefore I think we should change paths, but I do think, I hope the town officials come together to help us understand why this does in fact make sense from a financial perspective, because it's really confusing to me.
I just wanted to clarify that submitting the SOI doesn't close any doors, right? It doesn't do anything to prevent us from restructuring the elementary schools further down the line. It doesn't commit us to building a new, all it does is keep the doors open. So we're not, by voting to submit it, we're not necessarily saying that.
Just opens the door.
We're just saying.
Just putting
that
in our
we-
application.
We definitely don't want to close the door on this. We want to, yeah.
Go ahead, Jake.
And then I'll just say from the big picture perspective, being part of those conversations when we were exploring the merged options, 2006, somewhere in there.
Oh, please, I'm not that old. Like 13, 14.
Baby, and I was like, those.
I've been here longer than I realized. So anyway, all I'll say is that separate from the financial part, really, it's the schools are viewed as the community center.
Yeah.
Right? In Essex, we hold our town meeting in the Essex Elementary, right? It's as much the heart of the community as it is an educational building. And so therefore, that's part of where the logic might break down a little bit from a financial perspective when it's viewed as a community asset.
The regional agreement also requires, it would require a change to the regional agreement. It certainly could be done. I mean, I'm not suggesting this is not a good question.
No, it was discussed
We
at that
we
time.
went through the same process, so it is an important question. And it would require a change to the regional.
And if it helps, this building, you guys check me on this. On average, we could do 60 students per grade level at this building. Once we get above that, then we're using secondary rooms for primary rooms. So all the project rooms would have to go to classrooms. We would run out of space. I don't think we could get everyone. If we had an emergency issue and you had to keep school moving while we repaired the building, you could probably do something creative with a staggered. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do, but in terms of a long-term comfortable fit that maximizes a new facility, I don't think we would be able to use it as it was intended.
Emergency is different.
Yeah. Because you can set up classrooms in the gym.
We're not in public comment right now, sorry. We're not.
There's not a question, it's the back door side of the thing that's obviously.
Your call.
We are on a time crunch right now. Can we talk about it after though and maybe enter it in the next meeting? Thank you. So that being the case, is there any other question or comment on this or shall we move to vote? Okay,
I'd like to move to vote.
okay. All in favor of, actually, this is the
Didn't we already
vote. Yeah.
We already voted, didn't we?
No, we made a motion, we had a second, we have discussion, all in favor. That's a lie.
No, I'm just abstaining, so I'm just have to go.
Got it. All opposed? 0. Any abstain? That's Matt Harrington abstaining. Motion carries. You're authorized to create final version and move forward with that.
And we will share out that final version when it gets polished up.
Thank you. Draft district calendar.
Any inputs?
6:30.
6:30.
Yep. My inputs is that it's tiny.
It is tiny.
My summer list is gonna include other formats for our lovely school district calendar.
Can I ask?
It's not your
It will be bigger.
Yes.
Converting it to PDF
I know,
shrunk it, and
I'm
I
just
was in a
kidding.
bit of a rush, so I went with it.
I'm just joking.
So usually the calendar of the school calendar is really up to you. So what?
No, that
Okay,
one, that one's not up to
That
me.
one's actually up to us.
And
Okay,
Mita.
so let me ask this way, what are we looking to approve that
Sure.
is, might be important to us that we need to be mindful of?
So typically, the big questions that come before the committee, so it's a joint, honestly, it's not a contentious process, it's a very routine process that we go through every year. Things that emerge at the school committee level for discussion is renaming of holidays in a more inclusive way, that's been part of our discussion. The contract defines the beginning of the year, so that's already etched in there, so which day we start school. So by contract, we start so many days before Labor Day. So we come back for 2 teacher days, and the first and second day for students, then there's the elongated break. If the committee wanted to change that, or Mita wanted to change that, we could get into some discussions around that. Typically, also for discussion is, and just notice, right now, we don't have the practice of having Good Friday off. We go to school on Good Friday. That's been a school committee discussion. So public holidays, flow of the calendar, graduation date is set by the state. It's 12 days before the last day of school. So this year it's a little funny. It's on the 31st, but it seems to work with what those constructs are. So if you wanted to make a recommendation, maybe we want to change where February vacation falls and go to a March vacation. Those are the types of things that typically come up at the school committee level. If you want us to look at, or want the PDC to look at a different configuration of Wednesday half days, we kind of took that up as part of negotiations, and my walk away was, let's not work with that this year. Let's kind of keep the same blueprint. So this just represents a year forward blueprint of that. We kind of, some of the things already got vetted in negotiations. We vetted trying to move conferences to the evenings. That didn't make it. So things like holidays, naming, do you want a longer Christmas holiday break? Do you want to move February break, elapse April break? All of those types of things are up here.
But the number of the holidays, is it part of the negotiation already pre-negotiated?
You mean like the bank holidays?
Like you mentioned about Good Friday, there could be other ones. So
All
the number of
all the holidays that are represented on there, Columbus Day, Veterans Day, Washington's birthday, Patriots Day, the last 2 fall within breaks. Juneteenth, which we won't be in session for. Those are all just mandated holidays, and we follow the DESI regulation.
Okay.
There was a year where we debated not having Veterans Day. I don't recommend that. I think that's an important day for us to recognize. So I don't know if there are other holidays on there. The other one that's contractual more than reflection of DESI and what I call the bank national holidays is we do have that Friday before the long weekend in September, Labor Day weekend. It's just kind of become a practice.
Can I ask so I have a question then. Do you need a vote on this tonight? Do we typically vote this early? Or do we have the ability to, now that people are looking at this, maybe think about it a little bit and vote on it at our next meeting? Is that?
You can think about it and vote on it at the next meeting, but if you want the PDC to take a
To
look at
consider
anything,
anything, yeah.
if you could let me know tonight
Okay.
or by next week, that way there we can have a revised version to you by May 1st.
Yeah.
Usually, this is late for us.
Yeah.
And we don't usually come out very early with our calendar, but people are gonna want to know things that don't typically move, but when are the first days of school?
Yeah.
When are we getting out next year? And when are the breaks? Because people want to start planning their holidays.
Okay, then.
Really, I have a really quick question. Or do you want to say something?
No, I had a follow-up, but go ahead.
Um,
good.
The one question I hear most frequently,
It's probably-
nobody can ever remember when the friggin' Wednesday half days are. They seem to throw the entire community for a loop every time they come up.
Including me.
And I see that by spring, or like by, I think, January or February, they start being the first Wednesday of every month. That is something I can remember. My brain can process that. Whereas during the fall, and the reason I'm telling you this is I'm sure there is a good reason it's not done this way. But in the fall, you don't have that consistency, which means you have people saying, how can there be another half day? When like, there's always the same number of half days. All of us know this intellectually, but it really upsets us when we feel surprised
So,
by them.
and there is a why behind it. I don't even know if it's a good why, but it's because in the fall, the consistency of, there's more breaks. And what we were asked to do a few years ago was try not to double up like a holiday week and a Wednesday week.
Yeah.
So just to space them out between the Veterans Day conference chunk throws us for a loop. So we try to stay away from November altogether. And in October, I think it's in the first week, but it's not on a Wednesday. It's a full day on a Friday for PD conference. And why do we do them on Fridays? It was somebody's idea a few years ago that parents would be liked it on a Friday because if my kids aren't in school, I can make a long weekend of it if I'd like to. So a lot of those quirky things are actually at the time were things people were interested in, but it may not still be true, and we're very open to looking at that.
All right, my question for you to put forward, and again, if we generally are okay to vote on this tonight, if there aren't things we want to think about and move forward with, then that's okay, but I'm not gonna hold us up. I just didn't know if people needed time to think about it. I have just two things that I would wanna know a little bit more about. The Veterans Day week, where we have the holiday on the Friday, the day off for conferences, the day before, and then the half day Wednesday. I personally love this. It's like vacation before vacation. I love it too much. Has there been feedback on that since the change happened, and is it overwhelmingly good?
If you guys have heard anything, I'd love to hear. I haven't heard anything about it.
Okay,
No school.
then that's good.
No school Denver.
Yeah.
I mean, I think your reaction is surprisingly positive from what I think for working parents, November is a very hard month.
It's a hard month.
Yeah.
The reason, it's in this configuration, it used to be, at one point it was all day Tuesday and then a half day Wednesday.
I remember
Was like, are you kidding me? So then we went to, after some discussion in school committee, half day Monday, full day Tuesday. That didn't equally problematic. Now you're coming back for
half day.
not everybody's coming back, but
Right.
like you're breaking momentum from your weekend, you're coming in for a half day, then you've got another full day and a half.
Yeah.
So this was the try last year, which was, it doesn't do anything for no school November, but it does at least chunk all of the time together.
So,
And then,
In the conference day, I mean, for those who sat in on negotiations, those are contractual when those days are at this point.
okay. And then my second part, and I think then Kate was next and then Anna, was just that I do think we've been trying in the 3 years that I've been here to talk about Columbus Day, renaming Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples' Day. I think most districts around us at this point, I shouldn't say most, I know some districts around us have taken that step, and I think we should put that back on the table. All right, Kate Stern, then Anna.
That was my point as well. I think that this is the third year in a row that I've been here and we've talked about that. I think that our calendar is a reflection of our values, and I would like to think of us as a community that is open to considering what we want to reflect on our calendar. I think that I think what has made it difficult for us to make this change is that it's a bigger conversation, and that conversation hasn't happened. And I'm not sure what the avenue is for pursuing it beyond mentioning it once a year, twice a year, whatever it is.
Do you want to respond to the process, or Anna, is your question related to this, or is it separate?
Separate.
Okay.
It can be a big process.
Can it be a vote?
It could be a vote right now. I mean, we're in a different place than when it first came up, and when it first came up, we hadn't done a lot of the work we've done now, and I don't know that we've done it here at this table, but you would get total support from me that they're not going to bump it. I think they would be very pleased with this change in titling. But I think they would find it more consistent than with the work that they're doing.
All right, let's hold that for a moment then.
But no, it's just, it could be a
Yeah.
scheduled discussion.
That's what I was gonna say. I think I would rather have it on an agenda and have people at least have an opportunity to weigh in on it.
So we could put that on the final, as part of the final.
Great, thank you.
Because things like that, modifications to the second half of the year, when they're gonna have the half-day conference, those things easily can be done kind of fluidly throughout the year. At the end of the year, if there's an amendment, we bring it forward. what I can't do and what I don't want to do is I want to get those beginning of the year, those solid dates where people either have to plan to be back here or to have childcare in the fall as soon as possible.
So I always find it a little bit odd that we are starting the school 2 or 3 days before the long weekend, Labor Day weekend. So why not start the school the Monday, the 28th, that is the last week of August, or just start after Labor Day? What's the rationale to start midweek, right before Labor Day?
The thinking was, we used to be, so just a very, very quick history, because I can hear people coming in.
And we do have one more thing.
So we used to be an after Labor Day start, and when we moved to before Labor Day start, we had to negotiate with the association, and part of the agreement was we would move to 2 teacher planning days, so they come in, get their rooms prepped, do all of their things, and then bring kids in 2 days to kind of get them oriented and acclimated to the school year. Then there's an extended break, and then they come back. I'm not gonna stand, that's just kind of the way it was thought out at the time. You have a group of people, I think the teachers appreciate being able to go through some of the nitty gritty of the beginning of the year and getting kids kind of back in the swing of things. One could argue it breaks momentum. I don't think there's a deep pedagogy aligned here. It's just kind of become what we've agreed to. And I don't think we would be successful in moving the start date back any sooner into August. And people really like to be out by mid-June.
It's good to know.
I think that's true for teachers and for parents. As closer as we can get to June 15th, the happier people seem to be.
I know that we're in a time crunch. Can you, I don't know if there's a quick answer. Why are our half days on Wednesdays instead of on Fridays? Is it because of the extended day Wednesdays, which would be very inconvenient on a Friday if you were a teacher?
Oh, I hate when I have to give these, we've always had them on Wednesdays. We moved them to Fridays where it's kind of suited need. I'm open to moving them to Fridays. I don't know if we'll have teachers in support of it. We can certainly talk it through with them. Sometimes I get nervous, like end of the week, last thing we're going to do is have Michael Eatman come in and work with us on a deep thought reflection piece. I don't know if that is our best, I don't know if we're our best selves at that point. I think we could have the conversation. I know other districts have certainly moved to it.
I would just be interested in,
I can bring that to them.
it's not something that I feel especially, I mean, I personally would be celebrating half-day Fridays rather than half-day Wednesdays. I just think that it's more convenient for the family
Parents.
rhythm. But
Totally
if it
open
was
to it.
something that teachers felt strongly about, it's not something that I would argue with them on.
Yeah, I would want to know the teacher sentiment on that for sure, because there are plenty of things that are
And I'm not gonna
balance.
guess, I'm going to guess for PD, they'd be sure, but faculty meeting at 3 o'clock on Friday, probably not. So let's see what we get back on it. If it's the will of the group for me to investigate, I mean, I'm happy to run up the flagpole.
Straw poll, do we want her to run that up the flagpole? Thumbs up, thumbs down. This is straw poll. If you
Let's-
don't care, that's fine. That's enough to run it up a flagpole.
If you've been around a
Just
little
to
while,
get a
I
sense.
hate the calendar. This is my least favorite activity of the year. And I guarantee you, you will all look at it, we will all look at it, and we're gonna miss something that somebody else with an eagle eye will find. So it is always a work in progress, but are we comfortable with the beginning days and at least through? We're not going to take on changing February break or April break next year.
I don't think we're in a position to take on more big things right now.
Okay.
I mean, really. So do we want to have a vote on the general then, knowing that we're going to move forward with the Columbus Day, or does that need to be part of the vote?
We can change call, if you're good
Columbus
with
Day could be
beginning and
separate.
end in the vacation periods, I would just,
Then let's do
let's
that.
take that vote. I'll send it back to PDC saying, okay, we've got
Yep.
the outline of
The
the
outline.
calendar is approved. Let's kick around the idea of Fridays. What does that do?
I'll entertain a motion to do exactly that.
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Excellent. Thank you. You have start
Okay.
dates and dates. Okay, the last thing is school committee comment, but we have to remind everyone that we relocated finance subcommittee report to this. This is a very time crunched opportunity, but I have to do this.
Yeah, and I think you're okay because they're gonna start with some of the ceremonial pieces typically, right?
So we can
don't
walk
have
in.
our-
the-
yeah, you guys-
We don't have our checklist.
Okay.
I don't know if that's.
Oh,
Item, yeah.
Diane will look this up.
Do what you
Okay,
need to do.
I've got to do what I need to do, and then we can move from there. So here's the scoop. We did have a collaboration meeting last week. We initially got started with the Manchester, just making sure everyone was set for tonight primarily, and very quickly moved into conversation about ethics and a number of aspects, potential override. Again, they're still finalizing. My report to you, our report to you, is that they're still finalizing their numbers. They're still finalizing exactly what they're planning to do, but right now it does look like there will be a vote for an operational budget, our operational budget, and a vote for an override for this district, and then the same for Essex Tech. So that's 4 votes for education in a row there. But the thing that I really need to bring up tonight is that there's a continued conversation happening about a request for data, and the understanding, depending on who you ask, is very different of where things were, where they are, and where they need to be. So back in January, I went back and looked through all my emails and everything. A representative from the Board of Selectmen to the collaboration group had started an email chain of conversation that went back and forth. Pam contributed, Avi contributed, conversation about wanting to look at data about class sizes, because again, Essex is looking at money crunching here, and wanting to know more about the class size situation. That email went back and forth. There was some discussion within the email, which was great. At a couple different collaboration meetings, it came up as a verbal topic. Can you just give us the raw data? The answer that was given was yes and no, that the way we are structured is that Pam and Avi, when they create new reports in particular, or create any report, always report out to the school committee first, so that there's not reports going out to other people that we haven't had a chance to vet ourselves. And that the timing for that would be at the March meeting where we ended up doing that. The way that's been discussed and portrayed in different meetings, I know I've personally been at meetings where it's said that the request is being ignored, but the answer was given that it would be addressed in March. And so it's just been a little bit contentious, and it kind of came to a head on last week during our collaboration group. So the response to that request is this, which we had gone through at our last meeting. We had in our last packet the class size by breakdown that Pam went through with us, that has the bracketed approaches. I don't know if it was it March 7th or 21st? I've got it in my 21st stuff.
Okay.
Anyway.
I think we started at the 7th because that was our preliminary school choice conversation.
Preliminary, and then this, I think, anyway. To make a long story short, they're considering, okay, lovely. They're considering this insufficient to have met the request that was made. That's really the long and short of it. There's a lot longer about it, but they're considering that insufficient and would like to have raw data for each section not by teacher name, but each section in the district with the class size throughout the district. I want to make sure that I'm clear about that. Right? That's the request as we currently understand it. Having that raw data, and there was great discussion about it, about concerns about what's the purpose of this? What's the outcome for it? The constraints on time. Also, is this purview correct? Our Manchester leaders representing in collaboration seem to kind of have one opinion that this is not that level of granular detail is not necessarily appropriate for those boards. Our Essex representatives feel differently. At this point, we've been trying to handle this behind the scenes and work through it, but this has to see the light of day now. And at this point, our committee needs to decide if we are willing to, if we are interested in directing our superintendent to provide that granular level of data to, well, first to us, and then to the other boards who have requested it. I would like to hear, I'm going to give Pam's a moment to share her thoughts and opinion on it. I don't know that we can cover this in 9 minutes, but it has to be brought forth. And there was some general agreement at collaboration, though, that whatever this is, it's not going to solve anything in the next 30 days, right? So even if we continue this conversation on May 1st, I think that we'll at least have started it. We can all be thinking about it. I will also note that just as a point of understanding, Hamilton Wenham underwent a year-long look at this last year. I've connected with the chair over there. So to help their school committee understand class size, where things are, what it means, what it doesn't, and what's useful about it, it was a year-long exercise. So I just want to let people know that if we're doing this, this is going to be a commitment, that this is the thing that is going to take some time, like the thing. So I would like to get Pam's input. I don't think we need to vote on this tonight, but it needs to see the light of day so that I can get back to them and say, look, we're discussing this at the committee level now. We want to be sure that we're understanding what we're understanding with this request. Go ahead.
Can I just ask something that you addressed when you're speaking? Can you address, I would have thought pursuant to FOIA, some of this stuff, we don't have much of a say in, we either obligated or not. So if you could just kind of incorporate your understanding of that, that would be helpful.
I think we have a couple of things at play. This isn't a FOIA request. This is, at heart, the question here is, does a sub-board or, and I may be misunderstanding how Essex is constructed. The superintendent reports to the school committee. The school committee can ask for this report. We can agree that we want to follow the Hamilton Wenham blueprint, and we can go through and do a teach-in next year on how you build the high school master schedule, what the implications are, what the intersection of personnel, pedagogy, class choice, student options, all of those things, right? Because it's loaded in terms of understanding what you're looking at. To cut to the chase here, the question is, does the finance committee of one of the two towns have the authority to direct the work of the district? And that's what came up on Friday. And the answer is no. The answer is they should be putting those requests in to the board. And if the board wants to take up those requests, they can. And that's really what we're doing. That's kind of what's at play. If we got FOIA'd, I'd submit it to the attorney and say, what can I disclose and what can't I disclose? The whole point of the collaboration team is to work together, not to create surprises, not to create gotchas, but to seek mutual understanding. So I think what has been said is, please understand that what we provided for you gives you a sense, we're completely disclosing it. We're not hiding that we have small sections. Just turning out the master schedule is only going to create a higher volume of work and questions, because what you see on the page it may allow you to engage in an Excel spreadsheet exercise, and you're going to say, if X% of your classes are X, why don't you reduce those classes and therefore this many teachers? That makes perfect sense, but that's not the exercise. The schedule isn't just a spreadsheet. It's a process of many things, and that's what we've been trying to communicate, which is, if you want to understand it, we want to take you on the journey and explain what you're looking at. We don't want you to create new work and new obstacles for us now that we're putting out other fires. That's really at heart. So if the committee wants to go through this exercise, fully on board. I think we have a little bit of a trick to bring on somebody new and get them schooled up and in a position to kind of lead us through this, but I'd be willing to take that on with that individual. I think it would be irresponsible of me to blindly respond to that request and then put that out there, and all we're doing for the next 30 days is trying to put out fires and answer questions.
Okay, Diana? Yep.
Do you feel like going through this process would give you deeper insight into class sizes, or do you feel like you have the information that you need to make informed decisions that are in the best interest of our district?
And it's important to know, I feel very informed and very comfortable with understanding the complexity of the process. The responsibility for making those decisions is the high school principal, the middle school principal, or each of the elementary principals as it relates to their schedule. That's what they're hired to do, is make those decisions. If they choose we may disagree with it, but within their allotted resources, they may choose to run 6 classes of 5 and 7 classes of 30 because something happening in those classes of 5 with 5 kids is necessary. So that's my apprehension at putting something out without any clarification as to, or understanding as to how decisions are made. Not a widgets process, it's really trying to craft pathways. And sometimes it gets so personalized as to knowing these 5 kids started on a pathway in the 9th grade. And if we remove this class this year, even though it makes sense by some policy, which we don't have, or some pure formula, then we've got 5 kids who don't necessarily have what they need to get into college, something like an AP art.
So,
So there's a lot in it, I think,
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to say.
so I get what you're trying to say, and it sucks when people are trying to micromanage. So I get that. I think we might also want to check the regional agreement. I believe that I read somewhere that, both towns actually have at some point the right to ask for data. Now, I don't know what kind of data, but we need to check the regional agreement. That being said, I do think that, yes, there is a long process that I think having a workshop, having everybody to be understanding the same page would be great. It's a great first start. But from what I see, this is years of buildup of mistrust and lack of communication. And people, the more that we don't provide, and I get what you don't want to, the longer that kind of
Let me be
distrust.
very clear.
Yes.
I will happily
Yeah.
turn over this report if this body thinks it wants to see it and then wants me to turn it over. I am not refusing, but I have an issue with how the request, now becoming a demand, is coming up.
So, and I just want to clarify, we aren't going to solve this
No,
tonight,
no.
so let's take.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be
continued.
abrupt.
Yep, so very briefly, Kate, then Jake, and then we are going to adjourn, but this is the conversation that we need to be thinking about, and continuing.
Am I correct in remembering that we had to add a budget line to bring in additional staffing in the central office to respond to the number of, in part, to the number of data reports and the amount of,
No, not specifically for that, but we are using the new data. The data manager is relatively new. That came up when we started going back and relooking at some raw data that we had collected on private schools, but hadn't formed into anything. So we were using a lot of his time, but this would be more of the principal's time.
Jake?
So I think for me, the question of whether or not this is public data matters, to Erica's point. So I think we need an answer to that. The other thing, I think part of the intent of the request is to get us talking about our current situation, creative situations, knowing that the budget is tight and going to be tight in the future. And so I would encourage us to undertake some sort of process ourselves to look at that. I do work with districts that have policies that say classes under 10 don't run, right? And we don't have that, and that may be totally fine, but I think it's time for us to explore those kind of conversations. So to the extent that we should be engaged in it, and from my understanding, that's functionally what that push on us is really about, is to get us to talk about that. They readily say they're not the experts, but I think it's a way for them to encourage us to do that. And I think it is probably something we should undertake in some form.
To be continued.
I think my other very, very quick walk away is, I think there needs to be a summit after this summer, after the May meetings.
Yeah.
Among the boards in both towns.
Yes.
Because they functionally are now starting to operate very different.
Yeah.
I don't agree, Anna. I respect your position, but I don't agree that there's been many, 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 many years of mistrust. I think this has started to emerge over the past few years when budgets have become tight. And we are in the position of managing two towns' perspectives on how we should come to a resolution and how to solve that problem. And it is getting a little hot, but I feel that the intent of that group has been very positive for many years. Unfortunately, Anne had to leave.
Yeah.
And we have solved many big problems in that room. And I think we just need to get back on track. I think something that did come out, and I'm publicly going to share, is that there is a fundamental financial problem that is being masked by all of these other layers of conversation. And I don't disagree with you, Jake. I think it's an interesting way to begin a conversation about what can we do differently? What do we have to hold true to? But the problem we're trying to solve came out in that
Yes, it did.
we need to grow at 1.5% annually for Essex to stay within its annual budgeting model.
I don't even know if that's correct, because it was,
That was what
what
was
is that, what is affordable? It's Essex's portion at 2.5. So it's whatever under that.
And I think
Which may or may
Brendan
not
had
be.
suggested that that would be a 1.5 annual growth for us that grows up to 2.5 through apportionment as it stands now. So knowing that that's kind of at the heart of the question, it does make sense to look at the schedule, but I think you need to look at it in an organized, processed way and not just throw a bunch of numbers out there and then be fielding questions left and right and making greater confusion in the situation. They have the numbers, they can plot that on.
I know. So maybe part of what we'll be thinking on between now and our next meeting is, what is the problem we're trying to solve and what's the best way to solve it? Motion to adjourn?
Yes,
That's a
I need
first
a-
and second, all in favor?
yes.
Sorry to rush at the end of this for anyone online, but we have to get into the meeting. Oh, are we already off?
Are we offline?